All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Christine Kickles. Welcome to the very first session of this year's summit. I'm a College of DuPage librarian and part of this year's planning team. And you are in breakout room A, and we have three presenters today presenting on the topic as student as interviewer, faculty research as topic. And we have three of them that will be doing like a panel presentation. They'll be taking questions at the end. You can put those in the chat box at any time, and I will keep an eye on that and we'll pose those questions to them at that point. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first presenter today, and I'll let you go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you, Christine. And good morning, everyone. My name is Ed Remus, and I'm the social sciences librarian at Northeastern Illinois University. And as mentioned, what I would like to present to you all today is a model for university library podcasting that you all can consider as something that you may wish to apply or modify for your own institution. So, first, a little bit about the proof of concept for this model. Really, all we've produced so far is 10 episodes. And so I want to stress that really what we're presenting here today is a model and a proof of concept. And if you're interested in seeing what we've done, you can visit the URL that I have here on the screen, or you could simply do a Google search for NEIUideas, and you'll be able to see the 10 episodes that we've produced and published so far over the course of a few years. So who are today's presenters and what have been their roles in this project? Well, I've been the project coordinator and co-host of the podcast since 2019. Maria Gonzalez was an undergraduate NEIU student intern in the spring of 2021, where she did an excellent job as interviewer and producer and editor. And then Jim Laczkowski's role was as an equally excellent UIUC iSchool graduate student, practicum student last summer, in which he designed a suite of video tutorials to prepare future students to play roles as interviewers and editors, especially as editors and producers, the technical aspects of podcasting. And so we'll be talking to you about those different roles and our experiences here today. So how did this all get started? Well, the suggestion came from a member of the NEIU library staff named Jonathan Gronley, and he was a former student of Troy Swanson, who I believe is involved in the summit here. And Jonathan served as a producer and editor for our early episodes. So he had a good idea for us to begin a podcast, but we initially faced a kind of identity crisis. What would actually make this an NEIU Libraries podcast? So we kicked around a few possibilities: podcast about libraries, podcast about librarianship, podcast about new books, but there are already podcasts like this out there in the world, and we weren't sure that we wanted to create just another one. If we were to do a library podcast about campus goings-on in general, we felt that that would lack library identity. So we settled on a model in which the research of the subject faculty at Northeastern would be the topic of our podcast, and NEIU librarians, library faculty, would serve as interviewers. So underpinning this concept was a notion of academic libraries resting at the heart of the research process, and a focus in podcast interview episodes on both the products and the process, especially the process of subject faculty research at our university. So we came up with a few different roles. NEIU library faculty would serve, two of us initially served as hosts, co-hosts, and project coordinators. And then those two of us, as well as additional library faculty, served as interviewers. NEIU subject faculty served as interviewees. Our library staff member, Jonathan Grunley, served as editor and producer, and we imagined our audience as the NEIU campus community or the general public. And we conducted our interviews in the library's recording studio. So this is sort of the credits roll, but I want to describe a few of the people who were instrumental in making this model possible and some of their motivations. Our former digital scholarship librarian, Alyssa Vincent, was seeking content that would be related to faculty research for our nascent digital commons. Our dean, Stephen Harris, who may be here in the summit today, sought to showcase the library's technological literacy on campus. We were able to recruit a University of Chicago PhD student, Marco Torres, who helped us to establish some of the technical and aesthetic parameters of operating a podcast. Robin Harris, our information services librarian, designed our excellent logo, which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. NEIU library faculty, my colleagues like Michelle O, Henry Owen, Lisa Wallace, Mary Till, conducted interviews with faculty in their subject departments. And then the subject faculty themselves sought wider audiences for their research. So they were happy to speak with us about their research. And we worked with the Division of Marketing and Communications to send out our podcast episodes via a weekly campus newsletter. So this original model had some strengths and some weaknesses. I think that the strengths included the fact that library faculty gained familiarity with subject faculty and their research. We gained the goodwill of subject faculty who wanted to promote their research. We, for example, pioneered the podcast at a library open house, and campus administrators attended that and were impressed by the fact that we were doing this. We built a relationship with the marketing division to some extent on this basis, but there were some weaknesses with this model. It took a lot of time and energy for library faculty hosts and interviewers, and for our library staff editor and producer. Everyone did great work, but it just takes a lot of time to do this. Most fundamentally, it seemed to lack a strategic orientation. Our campus-wide priority at Northeastern is student success, and there was not a very clear relevance to between what we were doing and student success. So we ended up embracing a new model. And the context for this was that Maria's former professor in sociology reached out to me and asked if we could create a library internship for her because she was interested in pursuing a career in librarianship. And this was during COVID, when a lot of library internship possibilities were kind of closing up due to COVID restrictions. And so we decided to keep the same concept, but switch roles a little bit. So I moved into the role of, I maintained the role of project coordinator and host. I moved into the role as mentor for Maria as she conducted the interviews and edited and produced the podcast episodes. And we now conducted the interviews via Zoom. So compared to the previous model, this new model gave us some different strengths and weaknesses. It clearly positioned us in relation to student success because now we were involving students very centrally in the podcast, and it took at least some of the time and energy burden off of our library faculty and staff, right? There's still time and energy involved in that host and mentor role, but not as much as had been involved previously when we were also doing the interviews and producing the episodes, right? So if you are thinking about this model, then you would be in the role of mentor. So what does that involve? What advice could I offer? Well, I think it's useful to require some prepared questions about each aspect of the research process. When you're tasking students with reading subject faculty's research, it's useful to get them to think about, why was the topic chosen? What is the existing literature on the topic? What are prevalent interpretations? How did they gather the data? What was their method? How did they analyze the data, and what were the major findings or results? What were the implications for future research and/or practice? This is sort of a stock formula that you can use with any student and any piece of research to start to generate some good interview questions. At the same time, you want to encourage impromptu questions and dialogue. You want to encourage the student to find their voice, to think of themselves as society's representative in the interview, right? If they're wondering something at a given moment in the interview or something crosses their mind, chances are it would cross the mind of an average person, another student, a listener as well. So it can be relevant to sort of speak your mind and not hold back in the interview. It's important from a technical perspective to carefully review the first and last few minutes of each podcast episode that a student produces or a faculty member produces, my own case for that matter, because this is where mistakes in audio production tend to occur. And I think students also find it useful if you can offer them some guidance on communicating with the interviewee, templates for invitation, confirming the interview, following up, previewing the final episode before publication. And then finally, I think this is really useful if you're working with students who have an ambition to enter the library profession. Prepare them to represent this experience professionally. That can mean offering feedback, maybe suggesting that they show you how they would represent this experience on a resume, or parlay it into a job search and interview and so on. So is this model right for your library? Well, it may not be for a number of good reasons. And so again, I want to stress, I really just offer this as a model that we can all sort of put in our back pockets. It may or may not be right for you. If you lack faculty and staff who know something about podcasting, I knew a little bit going into this, or who want to learn about podcasting, then this may be kind of a steep climb. If you're not able to spare faculty and staff time for project coordination and student mentorship, this is something we've consistently dealt with ourselves, then this may not be right for you. It can be a challenge to recruit interested students who know something about podcasting. We're very fortunate to have Maria on board with us, but we've worked with another student who had to drop out and maybe didn't know as much about podcasting. We're currently working with a student who's doing well, but that is a challenge here. That said, I think that this model can offer some real benefits to libraries. It strengthens relationships with subject faculty and librarians' knowledge of subject faculty research. Again, there's a promotional angle for the entire university, research being done on campus, but especially for students. I think this is an opportunity for a library to create a high impact practice for students to get involved in. This is a great way to structure an internship or practicum opportunity for students, be those students of your institution or other institutions like library schools. And it's an opportunity to mentor students in librarianship as a profession to help them get their foot in the door professionally. More ambitiously looking ahead, we may even develop a podcast-based 4-credit class at Northeastern. And I think this proof of concept could serve as a model. So now I'm going to turn it over to Maria and Jim, but I just want to stress that if you have any questions about this model or our experience, you can feel free to reach out to me at e-remus@neiu.edu. I'd be glad to talk with any of you who are interested in getting something like this going at your institution. So thanks for your attention, and now we'll hear from Maria.
Okay, I'm pulling up my slide. Okay, so here's my presentation on my library podcast internship. So to begin, my path to becoming a library podcast intern, I started at Northeastern studying Spanish, and somewhere along the way, I decided to have a change in direction and I started studying sociology. It was just something I was always interested in and something that I thought would take me in a good direction in my studies. I was faced with a big question approaching my senior year, and basically it was, what am I interested in and where do I want to work one day? I decided that I wanted to work in libraries, though I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do exactly, but that's basically how I got in touch with Ed and we started the spring internship of the NEIUideas library podcast. So the behind the scenes work that I did for the podcast, it involved a lot of reading and analyzing faculty research. I did a lot of note taking and summarizing to really familiarize myself with the material and understand it really well. I also had to generate interview questions for the faculty members. I organized it in a way that it would flow well in the interview. And then post-interview, I spent a lot of time reviewing the audio, listening it completely through, editing it, adding in music, cutting out some clips, and basically just putting it all together to make it sound polished and really well. And then afterwards, I helped with promotion to publish the finished podcasts on the university website. So I'll briefly talk about my first interview. It was with Adam Messenger, and he's an associate professor at NEIU. We talked about his book, Transgender Intimate Partner Violence. And we talked about how discrimination in our society increases the rate of intimate partner violence for transgender people. And it's a fact that 54% of transgender people experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime. We talk about how transphobic society creates unique barriers for survivors seeking help. Also, we talk about how transphobic cisnormity, which is the transphobic idea that cisgender people are normal and transgender people are not normal. We talk about how that creates new opportunities of leverage and control of identity abuse. The second interview I did was with Mary Thill, and she's also an associate professor at NEIU. We talked about two of her articles on student source selection and authority in the post-truth era. So the post-truth era, she describes that as the modern era we are in now, in which information and oftentimes misinformation from unreliable sources comes from the internet, causing skepticism. And she describes authority as the idea that some sources are more credible than other sources. She talks about how it is constructed and contextual. She gets this from the framework, which is a structure that librarians use to try and teach students to look into a source, to look at the credentials of the author, look at the editorial publishing process and ask, are these relevant to what I'm looking into? And something that she found in her study, which was interesting, is that first generation students and younger generation students are more likely to trust sources chosen by libraries more so than their peers. So the third interview I did was with David Springer, and he is a sociology professor. He was also my former sociology professor at NEIU. And we talked about a section of his dissertation on racial and gendered narrative scripts of serial murders. He talks about how in his findings, he found that Black people, specifically poor Black women, are uniquely exposed to serial murder. And if we ask why, he argues that this is due to racial and gendered narrative scripts, like stereotypes that are used to frame serial murders. And he gives the example of David Gein, and he was a serial murderer in America, and how society, the fact that society views whiteness as being the norm, the standard, and not particularly violent compared to other races. The society focused more on the fact that he cross-dressed and used that as a reason to explain why these murders are happening. Also, we talked about structural vulnerability, and he described that as how being marginalized puts one at risk for physical and emotional suffering. He also gives the example of Jeffrey Dahmer and how he had a lot of victims who were gay men, but they didn't speak out because of fear of outing themselves because of the situation they were in at the time. So it caused Jeffrey Dahmer to get away with a lot of these murders for a lot longer than he should have. So now I'll talk about the challenges and successes during this internship. The big challenge for me was basically stepping out of my comfort zone. I've never done interviews before. I never had to conduct them or just put myself in that role where I'm talking to faculty members about their research that they spent a lot of time on. It was a little intimidating at first. And also new technology. I used Audacity a little bit before, but not in this extent. I've never had to use it for this amount of time, and it took a lot of time and attention, and something I had to get used to. Also, just navigating my new workload and managing it with my other courses. This was my last semester before graduation, so I had a lot going on, and this is my first internship ever doing, so it was a new challenge to navigate everything and get everything done without feeling like too burnt out. And basically the main success of this whole internship was just all the new experiences that I have gained. like sharpening my analytical thinking from all the new material I was reading and learning, and all these new topics that I had to go over multiple times to understand. That definitely helps me think about things in a different way. And it also just acquired my interviewing skills when talking to the faculty members, and just trying to find my voice and trying to find a good flow that I can use for each interview. It definitely took a little bit of time, but I think I was able to get it good towards, even after the first interview, I was already improving. And then my editing skills, of course, it was a good refresher of Audacity, and then adding music and editing everything together and log audios. It was a process, but I think with time I kept improving. And then just my time management, I think it just improved significantly. After a while, I was able to get these things done a little bit quicker than before and understand the material better and just carry out the goals that I had. So to conclude, my current job now and then my plans for the future, since this internship, it really got me more interested in library work. I decided to stay in the library career field, and I recently got a job at Addison Public Library, and I'm in the children's services. My title is Children's Services Associate. And basically I provide different levels of customer service, like ready reference, answering questions quickly that they may have, readers advisory, which is connecting patrons to materials that they need or materials that interest them, and then technical assistance, like helping them with the printers, scanners, and doing things from their phones. Also, I provide program support for specialist staff. I help the librarians in participating in their planning and their scheduling and presentations of their programs. Like I help put craft kits together for the young kids. And then every now and then we have students come in from elementary schools, and I'm in charge of the craft time for that. And then as for my future plans, this internship really kept me interested in library work. So I do hope to stay in the library career, and I do plan on going to school this fall at Dominican University to pursue my new goal of becoming a librarian and starting a librarian information science program over there to hopefully stay in youth services, stay in public libraries, because I really like what I'm doing and I would like to continue. And that is it. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you, Maria. Now it's my turn to share my screen. If that works, does that work? I think so.
Stop sharing. Oh wait, here we go.
Okay, very good. My screen has been shared. Okay, so thank you everyone for having me here today. It's quite the honor, and I'm grateful to Ed for asking me to be a part of the summer practicum last summer, as well as being a part of this event. It was a pleasure to really help out with NEIU while attending the University of Illinois graduate program to complete my master's in information and library science. I'll start with a quick summary of my personal background and how it led to an interest in library podcasting, and eventually leading to my collaboration with Ed. Let's see here. Yeah, so it's just like an introduction to myself. I have to admit, the past couple of decades, I've had a lot of different varying experiences, but I think what ties them all together is just an avid interest in the arts. I think ever since I was a child, I've pretty much had a pair of headphones on my head, like you see today. Huge fan of my dad's record collection, but oddly enough, at least for somebody young, because I don't think this is too common, I was a huge fan of talk radio and audiobooks, even more so than reading. I did love to read, but I was more interested in hearing people's voices. I was kind of an audio learner, as I guess a teacher once told my parents, or an audio visual learner probably. But I started out in my early 20s as a musician, and did a lot of different things, had a few jobs here and there, one of which was a library clerk at the library, the main library in Northwest Indiana, which is where I grew up. And I've always been a little introverted, but I think my passion for the arts in some way led to me pursuing recording arts in an interesting way, where it was not just, let me produce a record. I wanted to capture people's stories in the similar way that an audiobook would. And it was around my early 30s that I just became involved with podcasting. Back when people actually had iPods. I started a film podcast with a friend of mine called Directors Club, only to later on decide that I wanted to do more than just host my own show. I wanted to help other friends start their own podcasts. So I created my own podcasting network called the Now Playing Network, which, I mainly known as a podcaster, but now I became kind of a consultant and a tutor, where I would go in and show my friends essentially how to record on their computers or laptops and what kind of equipment they needed and how to do the editing process and all that. And of all the podcasters I helped, one in particular went on to great success with now over 2 million downloads and several subscribers. They're called the Pure Cinema Podcast. They now work with filmmaker Quentin Tarantino, and they've partnered up with a movie theater out there in Los Angeles called the New Beverly. And the hosts kind of cite me as being a great help in getting them started, getting their feet off the ground pretty much early on. So I'm grateful to have had that opportunity. It's comforting to know that hard work like that can really pay off. So why library podcasting? It's kind of inevitable in the way, like I've mentioned, it sort of fits with my overall narrative. But like I mentioned earlier, I was attending the University of Illinois for my MLIS, and it's hard to narrow down my field of interest within librarianship, because as we all know, libraries have so much to offer, and there's so many career paths one can pursue. There's children's librarianship, teen librarianship, university librarianship, all that. But right around the time I decided to go back to school, I was independently helping out the Evanston Public Library start their own podcast with the use of my own personal equipment and helping to edit with my own laptop. Basically, I'd go into the office there and they would record an episode and I would edit it and then send it and they would post it up. They had musicians and authors and librarians and social workers, all sorts of people who would go in and tell their story in a way that, we're all doing today and in different ways. But they started out with talking about their past and kind of building a narrative towards the present. And I think just the interviewing process in of itself with podcasting is really just the art of archiving our history and what it all means to us independently, but certainly it's also about community. And that's what I loved about the Evanston approach. Was it wasn't about let's promote our services and the latest new releases and things like that. It was about how do we connect. And I think that's exactly what appealed to me about Ed's proposal with NEIU. And that's exactly why I became involved, because, nowadays we want to, talk with other people and learn from other people in very interesting ways, certainly with professors and things like that. And of course, there's also the use of technology. And nowadays with a smartphone or a computer, just about anyone can listen to these various stories and interviews and even download them and archive them independently in their own hard drives. And in some cases, people can even just go to YouTube to listen to a podcast as well. So yeah, several libraries certainly offer the ability to listen to and engage with digital content. But what Ed and his team started out with at NEIU, like he talked about, was just doing it differently with the interview process. And I wanted to step in and see how I can contribute, including the use of an online program called Zencastr, which is very similar to Zoom. It's less focused on the video and more about capturing the audio. And the process was relatively straightforward in the way that Maria talked about it, just setting up an interview with a professor and learning how to create an episode together. And I really felt good about that part because I have experience with podcasting, mainly about the arts and less about academia. But at the same time, I was really excited about that part. However, I had a little trepidation with the video tutorials that Ed wanted me to put together because I had no experience with that. And it was through a program called Screencast-O-Matic. And I've always been comfortable with just, audio editing and things like that, but with video I was a little nervous because, you do have opportunities to edit out things with both audio and video approaches, but it's very easy to become self-conscious on camera. So I kind of opted out of, showing my face along with the videos, only because I thought, let's focus on the audio. Let's focus on, how to actually show students and anyone interested really to create a podcast. And I know Ed has a number of video tutorials himself on the NEIU YouTube channel, and he does them very well and with ease. And I've certainly shown others how to create podcasts in person, certainly before the pandemic. And I was able to make suggestions to them in different ways. But this video tutorial process was very different and very exciting because I was able to show students how to use GarageBand, how to edit a podcast using GarageBand, how to record on Zencastr, and simply how to put an entire episode together from beginning to end and allow people to view these videos, which we can certainly do really quickly right here, if this all works out. Let's see, here, hopefully it loads up okay. It's taking a second. This is an example of a video tutorial that I did. Obviously, we won't play the whole thing, and oh shoot, there's going to show us an ad. I was hoping that wouldn't happen. Oh, I can skip the ad. There we go. So hopefully
okay, welcome back. So you've successfully recorded your audio files using Zencastr, as well as Audio Hijack for your backup track, and everything is saved and good to go. Now we just want to open them up and import them into GarageBand and start putting it all together successfully. And of course you do that by clicking on GarageBand. And if you already have recorded an episode, it'll pop up just like that, just like it did for me. But we want to start fresh. We want to choose a project and go with empty project here. And if you're going to be doing a recording in person in the future, you can certainly learn more about these particular steps here regarding your input device.
So that's just an example. I know we're pressed for time, so I won't share the entire thing. Let's get back to my slides here. Yeah, so most of this is pretty straightforward in terms of the positive results I've been lucky to have experienced with Ed and the summer practicum, which I kind of summarized here in this slide. I got to utilize my skills as a podcaster in a different way, mainly because I'm used to podcasting about the arts. And here it was an interactive collaboration with a professor named Andrew Young. And that episode will be uploaded soon enough, but doing the interview went very smoothly and I was very happy to provide that. But like I mentioned, I can't say enough of good things about getting out of your comfort zone and doing something new, using a different technology like Screencast-O-Matic in order to provide video tutorials like the one you just saw. There's a benefit not just for the students of NEIU, but anyone who comes across these videos on YouTube, as well as other aspiring podcasters who may be interested in working with me, which I've now utilized with my own podcast network there. I've created video tutorials to show other podcasters what I can do and what I can offer. And with my current job at the Chicago Public Library, I've certainly relayed my talents and my skills and certainly what's happened with the practicum to let them know that if they need any assistance with various programming or events or Zoom related events like that, then I can certainly add my skills there as well. So I'm very grateful for that. And basically just to conclude, for me, the art of interviewing is more than just questions and answers. It's about having an organic conversation that is archived for anyone to hear for future generations. It should be about, two people who are interested in learning together in a very transactional manner. And I think we should all be learning from one another, and at the same time, not making it too self-congratulatory either. I think it should just be natural. And I'm grateful that most of the podcasts that I've been a part of adopt that structure, and as well as NEIUideas. It's more about learning from one another. But yeah, I mean, the reason I chose this photo here is kind of an inspirational photo for some people, because Chance the Rapper got his start by using the technology available at the Chicago Public Library. And though he's not podcasting per se in this photo, he turned his passion into a success, and he was using GarageBand, which is pretty remarkable to think about. So that's why I always tell people to sort of adopt the practice of ABC, which for me is always be creating. So that's pretty much my summation here, and I thank everyone for letting me speak. Thank you to Ed again for having me be a part of this practicum program. And if anyone has any questions, I look forward to hearing those, or feel free to drop me a line via email, and check out the podcast network as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, panelists. Excellent. So if there are questions for any of our three panelists today, you can go ahead and put them in the chat box. But while we're waiting, I wanted to start off with just maybe just a question in terms of just the cost to start up this, and types of equipment that you all three may suggest that a library would have on hand. Is there anything in particular that you really need? Do you really need the high-end microphones or anything like that?
Jim, I think you might be best equipped to.
Oh, sure. Yeah, like I've mentioned earlier, people can certainly make podcasts using Zoom or Zencaster, and I think that's the way to go these days, especially for long distance recording. But I mean, I think you can get a really good quality USB microphone, and hopefully your guest will have something similar to that. I think that's very important. I don't necessarily think you need to get a fancy, $500 soundboard or anything like that. Some libraries have chosen to go that route, whereas I think you can just get the basics and make it the best, because a lot of these USB microphones are really high end in terms of their technology and sound quality. So
Thank you. So we do have a question from Daniel. He's asking, how much time from start to finish would you say is spent on researching, recording, editing, loading one podcast?
I'm thinking maybe Maria might be suited to answer this question, because Maria, you produced 3 episodes over the course of a semester. It was certainly a very part-time internship that you were doing. If you had to estimate and count up all of the hours you spent on a single episode, what number would you give? And would you give a different number for the first one compared to the third one?
Yeah, because the whole internship, it was about 3, a little less than 4 months. I feel like there was about, I think the first podcast, maybe we spent that first month working on the first one. I would say maybe like 5 to 7 hours a week overall, to get the whole, it's from the research to getting it shot to having it published, definitely 2-3 weeks maybe at most. And of course, some were quicker than others, but yeah, overall, definitely 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks max.
Thank you. And it looks like Joshua's raised his hand. Joshua, and you're on camera. Do you want to go ahead and just speak? I think go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, everyone. I had a few questions. I did go to the website that you'd provided. Were you putting your podcast out there strictly through the library's website, or did you also go through any kind of podcasting hosting site? And I could couch that in. was your audience meant to be just the campus community, if it is just on the library's website?
Yeah, that's a good question. So thanks to Jim's help, we have actually begun to migrate our existing stock of episodes onto libsyn. So we do have a libsyn profile. If you search on libsyn, you will find a few of our early episodes there, and we are putting more there. We're working with a part-time student intern right now, and he's helping us to do that among other things. Jim, would you want to talk a little bit about libsyn? I think you really opened my eyes to libsyn and what it can do. And I should mention, Jim created a video tutorial, I believe, that is about how to upload episodes to libsyn for syndicated broadcasting on Spotify and other platforms. So yeah, Jim, do you want to say something about that? Because that's really excellent.
Yeah, I would definitely consider a hosting platform like Libsyn in particular, because it makes it very easy and straightforward. They create an RSS feed, which allows for not only just a downloadable MP3 for anyone to have access to, but it distributes it to places like Apple Podcasts / iTunes, Spotify, I think Google Audio, forgot the name of that one, but all the major ones that people use. Libsyn makes it very simple to just set up an account, and then you just simply upload your final podcast file there, and it distributes it pretty much independently. I mean, you can choose where it's distributed to, but I mean, since I've been using it since the beginning, it's kind of my go-to. I know there's quite a few of them out there now that probably even have more detailed statistics and things like that, but I highly recommend people using libsyn outside of just making the MP3s available at the library website.
Thank you. And is the library keeping track of usage statistics through libsyn, or were you able to keep track of any kind of, I assume you were able to keep track of some statistics from the library website, but I assume there's a lot more statistical data that you can get on usage from a podcast hosting site, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I think, for the most part, people can go and see how many times an MP3 was downloaded through their personal website, but libsyn gives you a great detail, like specifically where it's being downloaded and from what source, in terms of, is it downloaded from Apple Podcasts the most or Spotify the most? Where are the subscribers coming from, even in terms of what country? And it gets really specific in terms of statistical data, to where that's definitely the right approach, is to go with libsyn.
One more final follow-up question, then I'll be quiet. So did you consider any other podcast hosting sites, or was that just sort of the one you knew and you decided to go with that one? Or were you looking at other, because I know there's quite a few out there.
Yeah, there's definitely a few out there now. I think when I first started, just because I'd heard of libsyn, it might have even been through Mark Maron's podcast. The same way they have Squarespace ads, they used to have libsyn ads. And I heard about it through them. And that was kind of the only one at the time. But now there's quite a few, to where I know there are way more options. There's maybe like a dozen libsyn type services out there that I haven't even personally explored. So there's probably quite a few options that librarians can consider if they want to start their own podcast now.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua, for the questions. You were actually reading my mind on some of that stuff, so this is great. We are at 11:30, so I think we should show our panelists a round of applause and appreciation for their preparation and presentation today. Very well done. The recording will be posted, by the end of May up on our website. So we have a break now before breakout session 2, but I have to tell you that in the midst of us in our session, there was some changes of links on the website for breakout session D, I believe. So if the next one that you want to go to is in breakout session D. I'm just going to tell you, refresh your page so that you've got the most current Zoom link, so that you don't encounter any issues. And then at lunchtime, there is going to be a possibility, or another Zoom room if you want to network or just kind of pop in and talk to people. We do have that available, and it's just kind of free form. So anyway, thank you again, everybody. It was nice to have you as a great kickoff session, and I will see you later today.
Thank you.